Hello and welcome to this video on the Steady State Fate Steady State Gate, an expanded and kind of broken out version of your classic low pass gate. So let's check out what's to come. This video is sponsored by Steady State Fate. Now the Steady State Gate, and what a great name for Steady State Fate to call it the Steady State Gate. The Steady State Gate, as I say, is a broken out and expanded version of your classic low pass gate. The expansion here mainly comes in the Timbre circuit, where we have wavefolding, saturation and a unique QAOS mode. And then we've got the broken out filter and VCA and inbuilt decay envelope, with some modelling and shaping on this decay and altering ways of affecting both amplitude and tone to give us that classic lovely low pass gate sound that many modular users love. We've got CV over everything, we can make it oscillate and there's lots of ways to use it. So without you kind of staring at my fugly mug any longer, let's check out the features. So let's take a look at the steady state gate here in detail. We first have our input, which is primarily for audio, although you can use it for CV as you'll see later in the video. This first hits a Timbre circuit, which can be a Buchla style folder, a saturator, or this unique QAOS mode. And this QAOS mode works with the filter to impart some instability, mayhem, and variability on the resonance structure. As well as the manual control, we have CV over that Timbre circuit there, and that Timbre output then hits this filter. The filter can be a 1-pole bandpass or a 1 or 2-pole low pass. We have manual frequency control and Q control for resonance, along with CV for both of them. The filter then goes through an internal VCA, which is either wide open when we don't patch anything to this excite input, or is controlled via the decay envelope, and that decay envelope has a CV and a manual control. The internal envelope also modulates the filter. It's this combination of VCA and VCF that gives us this lovely low pass gate emulation. And the envelope there is not just a simple linear or exponential curve, it's got all this kind of model of a vactrol ring in there, and they're slightly different in terms of the internal decays that modulate the filter and the VCA to give that low pass gate style sound. We have our output, and we also have an envelope out, which you can patch back into any of these controls to extend their behaviours, or patch back around the rest of your system. There's lots of ways to use this and lots of patches in the video, they're all on screen right now. So skip around as you see fit, and let's dive in. So here's a nice, simple patch in a way that's just used to animate basic waveforms. So I have a saw wave coming into the steady state gate, a trigger to excite the gate, and I've got 4 independent random voltages modulating the decay, the Q factor, the resonance, the frequency of the filter, and the timbre, which is set to be a folder here. And the voltages coming out of random step are quite subtle, they're quite low in voltage for this nice kind of human randomization, humanization. And you can just hear this gate dancing around really nicely. If I change from a saw wave to say a triangle, we've got the nice kind of woody folded triangle sound from this Timbre circuit here. Let's expand this with a pitch sequence playing and some drums and effects and expand it out into a more musical piece. lovely sounding patch. So here's an already characterful, quite kind of fizzy, slightly saturated drum mix, and we're listening to it drying the mixer, nothing coming through the steady state gate. And we'll start by adding some saturation in this timbre mode. It's going to add a lot of level. There's this really thick, kind of intense pushing of that kick. It gets really forceful, but it's not harsh. And in that 2-pole filter mode there, really nice smooth low pass filtering. Now one thing I quite like to do with big long drum sounds and certainly driven sounds is to chop them up, kind of carve them up nice and choppy in a VCA. You can make it sound like a stutter effect without having one. So with the decay up full, let's add a 16th note trigger to the excite. You can just hear it starting to chop into that as I drop the decay with this whole other kind of choppy sound. We could try a folder. And this is going to work really nicely to mangle these sounds when they're all chopped up. Maybe go 1 pole for this. Ooh, it's like a really nice bass line. So let's take a look at these timbre modes. I'm taking the triangle output. You can see the output of the steady state gate here on data. Now starting in this saturation mode, you can see we round off nicely. Listen to that low end, it almost kind of blooms into this thick bottom end. Then we can push into saturation with soft clipping, giving it this kind of hybrid sine square like sound. Going up to fold, notice the waveform becomes slightly asymmetrical straight away. Got that kind of curve at the bottom and that kind of straighter triangle linear top, if you like. An asymmetrical fold is often a really quite musical sounding one. You see those kinks of that waveform folding at the top but not at the bottom. Starting to fold at the bottom now. We can go up to this nice thick folded wave. And of course we've still got this filter, so if you want some heavy folding, you can really smoothly be filtering that in and out. Now going down to the QAOS mode, this changes the resonance behaviour. So I'm going to add some of this QAOS, add some resonance. You can hear it there, sizzling away. Bringing the filters cutoff down, a bit more Q, a bit more QAOS. You can see we're doing all sorts of kind of kinks and distortions in this wave. So here's a quick patch to play around with some QAOS mode acid. And it sounds great. This is simply a saw wave that's been pitch sequenced, nothing else. I'm exciting this in a 2-pole mode. And I have the output of the envelope patched back into the filter to give a more open, kind of rich character, a much wider envelope effect on that filter there. Adding some resonance, some Q. Got a lovely kind of acidic sound. And then that QAOS really kind of distorts and screws with that resonance. QOAS Acid. Get the timbre in QAOS mode, crank it up, nice high Q, and play around with some acid sounds. So here we're looking at dynamics. Think of this as velocity, level and tone changes. Think of it like how hard or soft you pluck a string or strike a drum. And you can hear this is a really dynamic gate. It's changing in level and tone for something more organic, expressive, and almost more human. Now I'm emphasising this with some modulation. Let's remove the modulation. I'm also bringing this trigger into the mixer, so you can see as I attenuate, we'll get different soft little hits, kind of warm, woolly little noise hits, through to the more percussive, striking low pass gate things we've heard the steady state gate do so far in the video. You can hear that nice clicky attack is starting to work its way in. You can hear there by varying the level coming in to excite, varying the triggers, we've already got a dynamic starting point. I can then use this signal that's varying the trigger to vary parameters on the gate. Have a higher decay, kind of a longer ring to them. So here the steady state gate is being used to enhance and create a feedback loop. I have my dry sound here, which is a basic, quite open, quite spacious little pattern on a chord sound. Now muting the dry sound, unmuting the effects. You get this really lovely analog filtering and feedback. It's got this kind of drum tape delay type tone. It's that bit of saturation, that bit of bandpass filtering. If I don't feed any more dry sound in, let's just hear this feedback loop tail. It sounds nothing like these digital effects. Let's change this to be, say, a 1-pole low pass. Add some feedback. Open that up a bit with a bit of res. A bit more saturation. And it's glorious. I love feedback loops. It's really kind of disintegrating there into this noise and saturation. So here I just wanted to have a little bit of a kind of filter test, just listening to the filter in the steady state gate. Lovely vocal band. Now let's lose the effects, lose my modulation, and we'll just listen to these filters just sweeping through. It's got that lovely vocal quality. To that band, here's a 1-pole low pass. Really smooth. Again, this really chewy kind of vocal resonance. And the 2-pole low pass. So we'll leave the filter on 2-pole there. Let's plug my modulation back in here. Great vocal, expressive, rich filter sound. So here I'm using the steady state gate as a standalone kick. The envelope out is purely for some visualizations and some sidechain. We've got this nice hard kick from the steady state gate. Now the other sounds I have here, some hats and snares, and a ride cymbal that's sidechained by using this envelope out. Now the kick simply comes from triggering excite, having the Q up to the point that it will oscillate, which is nicely indicated by a little sine wave symbol. We can push it further to change the tone of this oscillation. If you want a slightly harder, more saturated sound, and frequency there serves like your pitch control, and the internal envelope modulates the frequency, giving us this pitch-like kind of smack and attack. Now as excite responds to signal level, we can simply attenuate the trigger coming in for different sounds. Higher levels of voltage on these triggers will give harder, louder sounds that make this filter pitch go up even higher and give more of a clicky, hard transient. So I'll slowly bring up this trigger level and listen to the difference in sound. And you can get up to some seriously bright, hard kicks that really punch through a mix there. Personally, I like these backed off a little bit. And as I'm using a mixer to attenuate my triggers, I can actually use two different trigger patterns, and let's look at the envelope where we're doing this, and start to blend. Blend different triggers in for dynamic, exciting kick patterns. If I go over to my other pattern, that's channel 2 there, channel 1. We can actually take the envelope output, go into QAOS mode, and we patch the envelope into the input. We get some harder, again, more saturated kicks that really push through a mix. Blend a bit more of this other trigger in. So that's using the steady state gate there as a standalone kick. So here I'm exploring audio rate overtones, vocal, formants, glottal, yo-y, kind of speaking vocally sounds. My input here is the ultra kick. Instead of a kick, let's swap the input to be a droning oscillator. So here's a deep saw from Zephyr. And there's all those great kind of downsampled vocal type tones. Maybe fold the input a little bit. So we can be subtle, super destructive, and kind of everything in between. So this is another simple and quick patch where I'm using a triangle from an oscillator into the steady state gate with a trigger, just doing some basic gated, low pass gate type things. But by using the envelope out here, I can have modulation that follows the envelope of this gate. And I can modulate something like the index of the FM, the through 0 FM between these two steady state fate oscillators. And what's nice here is the kind of unity between them as I start to move or modulate the decay. The amount of FM coming through there will change. So try that envelope out for modulating other things outside of the steady state gate itself. So here I'm processing my guitar through the steady state gate. My input module has an envelope follower which is affecting the filtering. It's the green trace here on the Modax data. It's also negatively affecting the rate of this LFO. It's making the LFO slow down when I play harder, and that ramps back up in rate as the dynamic and the level of the guitar is softer. It's affecting the folding for a kind of tremolo timbre effect here. There's a splash of reverb mixed quite low, and that's really all that's going on in the patch. It's just a nice thing to play the guitar through. So I was playing around with the steady state gate and the guitar, and I wondered what a bass guitar would sound like, but also what striking this would sound like. What's a low pass gate rhythm like to kind of play into with another instrument? So here we go. So here we're going to explore a patch that came from Andrew at Steady State Fate, which he was calling Poor Man's Analog Modal Synthesis. Now, modal synthesis is how something like Mutable Instruments rings works. You have an exciter that then excites a resonating space, and this is done with digital technology, meant to emulate things like strings, bells, drums, kind of physical resonating items in the real world. And this is the bass patch, a basic low-pass gate type sound. Now that QAOS there, it's just really kind of adding in this kind of string-like pluck. I'm going to start animating this here. So I'm animating decay with this green line on the scope, which is just a sequence playing in time with my pitch sequence. And although this is analog, it does give us a kind of flavour of this modal synthesis. If we take a pulse with really thin pulse width, we're starting to get into these kind of modal synthesis type sounds. If I add in my Q factor modulation, Q here is going to add this kind of click and slap. So I'm going to use a gate, which is this blue trace here, to add little accents in. Effects back in. And with fully analog synthesis, we do get quite close to some modal synthesis and plucked string-like sounds. So here we're looking at modulating modulation, the saturation mode, and we get this shaping that certainly doesn't look like a clipped triangle. We could try folding. We get these nice riding waves. I'm going to stick with saturation for now. Now we can then start to slew, to smooth out this wave as we bring down the frequency. And as this is tuned for audio use, you need to get pretty low on that frequency to start filtering sub-audio signals like this LFO. We can add resonance or little wobbles by letting the input LFO here excite an almost oscillating filter here. If I do just make this oscillate, so there's no input now, it does just become its own LFO. But just before oscillation, the actual input LFO there excites these little wobbles, the frequency of which are on this frequency slider. You can see and hear these fast wobbles. So we can then slow down, maybe fold them. So we can get some really interesting, organic and more novel or unique modulations by slewing, adding little resonance wobbles and folding sub-audio CV through the steady state gate. So here's some more experimental, abstract, maybe West Coast influence you could say, bit of noisy modular work. It's a complex modulated wave, much like using a dual complex oscillator, and then adding folding. To really emphasize these metallic and harsh tones. One pole mode there to get this nice low pass gate response. And I have random voltages to all the controls here, making things dance around. With the frequency, I'm also mixing in some audio rate modulation that's modulated, it's coming out of data here. For further audio rate manipulation, FM of that filter. And I just wanted to show some really clangorous, dense metallic sounds through a low pass gate. So here's a patch that I just found to be really musical and rich and expressive. In fact, if I remove some of these modulations here, you'll hear that it's just a saw wave with a pitch sequence coming into the steady state gate. Sounds great as is, but then I'm using this yellow trace here, a sequence to modulate the decay. I'm using a second envelope to modulate the filter. So this is already quite dynamic with these differing decays, and the internal envelope does modulate the internal filter. It's nice to add another one in, add another envelope. It's one that's playing a different rhythm here. The green trace is my gate to excite, and the blue trace is my triggered envelope going into the filter cutoff. Then have some random voltages which are triggered every quarter note to modulate the timbre here, which is saturation mode, which will give level changes. And into the Q for different resonance amounts that randomly change too. Very rich, very expressive. So if you've got this far in the video, let me know which your favourite timbre mode is. Are you into wavefolding? Are you into saturation? Or do you like this unique QAOS mode? Leave a comment and let me know. So thanks for checking out this video on the steady state gate. I hope it's given you some patch ideas for not only this module, but for you to go away and apply some of these ideas to your own systems too. If you're a Patreon supporter, there's an extra video coming on synthesizing kicks, and that PDF patchbook on making feedback loops, and the specific feedback loop that I made in this video. Thanks for watching, do leave a comment, thumbs up and like, it makes a huge difference to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye.